UK Finance Minister Jeremy Hunt has announced a number of tax increases and tighter public spending. Hunt outlined a £55 billion plan with the intention of fixing public finances. Almost half of the plan is supported by tax increases and an increase in the number of people paying the basic tax rate. Hunt says that Britain's economy is set to shrink as it grapples with inflation.
UK Finance Minister Jeremy Hunt announced a string of tax hikes on Thursday, as well as measures to tighten public spending. The moves came in a plan set out to Parliament. Hunt said it was necessary to restore faith in policymaking and public finances after the short-lived premiership of Liz Truss.
But, Mr. Speaker, credibility cannot be taken for granted. And yesterday's inflation figures show we must continue a relentless fight to bring it down, including a rock-solid commitment to rebuild our public finances.
Headline moves include a freeze on income tax allowances, meaning more people will pay the basic rate. Hunt also lowered the threshold for paying the top rate and cut tax-free allowances for earnings from dividends. He increased a windfall tax on oil and gas firms and extended it to power generators.
I have no objection to windfall taxes if they are genuinely about windfall profits caused by unexpected increases in energy prices.
In all, the new tax hikes and spending cuts are meant to close a budget hole put at £55 billion, or about $65 billion. Hunt said the country was already in recession and government departments would need to find ways to save money. Plans to increase defence spending were postponed, while he ruled out restoring the overseas aid budget. Support for household energy bills was trimmed, but he denied that the plans amounted to a return of austerity, saying the National Health Service would get extra funding. Other public spending will be protected as much as possible. The opposition Labour Party said the economy was in a mess as a result of the government's mistakes. Markets gave a muted reaction to the plans, with sterling and government bonds edging lower.
Well, for a little bit more on this, we're now joined by economist and a regular contributor to our programme, Yusuf Dodia. Yusuf, thanks very much indeed for joining us. One gets a sense that the Chancellor of the Exchequer had very little choice except to raise taxes.
Absolutely, Peter. Well, you know, the UK is in a really difficult position. They broke away from the European Union. They've annexed their economy from the European economy. They've closed the doors to immigrants. You know, there's been that initiative to send refugees to Rwanda. And so what you have is a high labor cost country with very little prospects for development. The UK has also exported most of its jobs to the Far East because of the high energy prices, the high cost of doing business. So that puts the government in a very, very difficult position. And of course, increasing taxes is one way for government to be able to raise revenue, but it's also a mechanism that is making the cost of living very, very high for most people living in the UK. So what we have is a situation where the old construct, where you had immigrants coming in and doing all the dirty work, cleaning up the streets, working in the hotels and sweeping up for literally no pay, very little pay, that opportunity has now been cut off. And what you have is a very expensive economy to run. And I really sympathize with the Chancellor of the Exchequer because he's trying to maintain an economy which is deflating from all angles. A tough job, and I really wouldn't want to be in his position.
Cuts in spending, does that mean social spending is going to be affected? Because that's probably, including tax, will be a huge election issue for Rishi Sunak.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're going to look at social security packages being reduced. We're going to see a situation where to qualify for social security, they're going to be demanding a lot more from anybody who's applying. For example, to show more evidence that they're not able to get a decent paying job. We're going to see the cost of providing education going up. So students that want to do tertiary education are going to have to look for more expensive bursaries to be able to get that tertiary education. Chances are that even the cost of running the National Health Service is going to go up. And this is somehow going to impact on the pockets of the average British citizen.
All right, so it seems as if Jeremy Hunt, Rishi Sunak have gone 180 degrees from what Liz Truss and Finance Minister Kwarteng were trying to do. And so the question now becomes, what Liz Truss and co had tried to do was go the other way, wasn't it? To decrease taxes and so on and so forth. The markets reacted really badly. How are they taking this budget? Are they welcoming it? Is this what they wanted all along?
Well, what I think is maybe some sector of the markets will be, would I call it, pleased with the increase in taxes. But as you said earlier, you're looking at a situation where the government of the day is looking to try and stay afloat now, possibly at the cost of losing a general election down the road. Because quite clearly, if the cost of living in the United Kingdom goes up, I don't think that's going to go down well with the voters in a year, 2 years' time, when they have to face the people at a general election. So Rishi Sunak and his cabinet are really stuck between a rock and a hard place. They've got to make decisions that are going to try and boost the economy in some way in the short run, but also make decisions that are going to be positive for the economy of Great Britain in the medium term, because that is going to be an election issue in the next 2 or 3 years. So this is really a tough situation for them. And then on top
Yusuf, are you still there?
of that, we've got war with...
There we go. I think, all right, Yusuf Dodia speaking to us about this budget that's been announced by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt, in the United Kingdom. Chancellor is the Finance Minister equivalent for some of us, and essentially the citizens of the country are going to face huge tax issues, and this is at a time where inflation is hitting record highs, and so life is going to become decidedly more difficult for the average citizen in the UK, and this is 2 years before potentially an election. So, but it seems as if the government had no choice but to take this hard line when it comes to fiscal discipline. Well, let's go back to Yusuf Dodia now and start to wrap this conversation a little bit. They say that when America sneezes, everybody catches a cold. The UK economy is not small by any stretch of the imagination. Should we be in Africa paying attention to the budget that's been announced by Jeremy Hunt?
Oh, absolutely. Because remember that close to half of the African continent is a member of the Commonwealth, which are the former British colonies. And I think that the United Kingdom is trying to rally the Commonwealth as part of its global partnership development as a gap filler for having come out of the European Union. So any pressure on the UK is likely to have a negative pressure African countries that are affiliated with the UK. So yes, it's a space we need to watch. And I think that as African countries, we need to broaden our relationships. We need to ensure that we've got relationships with the East, the huge Chinese and Indian economies. We need to broaden our relationships with the European Union. And we've also got to look at our relationships with both South America as well as North America. I think we're in a world where the partnerships can be a variety of permutations, and we need to look at what the best relationship is for each individual African country. So yes, we've got to keep our eye on the UK. It has a direct impact on our economies.
They're going through record level inflation issues, and given the trade between us and the UK and Europe generally, are we likely to import some of that inflation?
Well, I think one of the advantages we have is that many of our countries have delinked our currencies from the British pound. Our currencies are linked to the American dollar, and that in some way cushions us from the negative impact of the British economy. But we still have many of our financial systems being processed through British banks, and that may have an impact. So I believe that we need to start looking at our banking system, our clearing system, and try to find ways of using alternate mechanisms that can avoid having to go through the British economy so that we're not caught up in their economic recession, which is about to take a fairly steep nosedive.
All right. Are there any lessons that we can learn on the continent about what's played out in the United Kingdom?
Well, quite clearly, what we are seeing is a global recession beginning to twist again. It's been with us for quite a while. And I think that as African countries, we've been too aligned with one or two big Western economies. And we can see that even the best economies do go through these difficulties from time to time in terms of recession. And I think the lesson that we need to learn is we need to spread our bets. We need to align ourselves much more broadly than we do now, so that we don't get a shock which might be activated by either the United Kingdom, the European Union, the United States, or even China for that matter, that will quickly reflect onto our economies. So we need to spread our bets, we need to broaden our relationships, and I think that way we can stay relatively insulated from huge shocks that might happen out there.
Yusuf, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much indeed for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Peter. You have a good evening.
All right, that's one of our regular contributors there, Zambian economist Yusuf Dodia, speaking to us about the UK Finance Minister, Chancellor of Exchequer's budget, and it's a huge tax hit for the average citizen there. And he was talking about us spreading our bets across the continent so that we're not tied into the misfortunes of others. Maybe another compelling argument for the African Continental Free Trade Area.